Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Thursday's edition, and we're broadcasting from Irvine, California and Long Island, New York. Jeffrey, welcome back on Thursday. Happy to have you with me today.
Happy to be here, Mark.
Hey, listen, let's talk about some follow-up economic news that hit today, and it really reinforces what we saw yesterday. Yesterday was a bad day. The consumer price index went above 9. It was 9.1%. It was higher than most economists had recognized. And we had Dr. Michael Busler on the show yesterday. We went through a lot of the economics for our viewers and listeners, a really granular detail. So following that today, the producer price index came out. And folks, the PPI is basically the wholesale input cost, the raw cost of goods and services. That jumped 11.1%, Jeffrey. That's even higher than economists had forecast. And what it basically does, it reinforces the belief that we are in this fight and it may take longer to get out of than we previously had estimated.
Well, because first of all, the producer prices is really a leading indicator, because that's going to be going into, the products, and then they're going to have to sell them for higher price.
Right.
So expect more inflation, guys. But the other thing is that, I don't know if you've heard, I've heard rumors that in 2 weeks they're not going to raise it by 75 basis points, but they're going to raise it a whole percentage point.
Well,
have you heard this?
Well, it's not actually rumors. You've had a couple of Fed governors come out and talk about it. Wall Street in the futures market, it's now 50-50 bet whether they will raise it 100 basis points. My guess is that they will. I mean, there's some Fed governors who are publicly saying today 75. Others have said if the data indicates it, well, we may be forced to go 100. That is a big number. Kid yourself not, folks. That is a gigantic increase, because raising and lowering interest rates are like blunt instruments. You don't feel the effects right away, other than maybe the housing market, but you will 3-4 months down the road. My personal opinion.
What Reagan did with Volcker?
Yeah, he had significant rate increases over an extended period of time. My personal belief is we could go 75 basis points and look at the data. The problem is, after the July meeting, there is no August meeting, and they have to wait till September. So they're saying, look, if it's not getting better, then maybe 100 is the answer. But I'm going to, we criticize Biden all the time, and I'm not going to let him off the hook, and which is, it's well-earned criticism. But Biden made a comment yesterday. He said the rate is exceptionally, unacceptably high, and he's right about that. But then he mistakenly said, the data may be dated somewhat. It's out of date. He actually said the wrong thing, but his point he was trying to make was we're looking in the rearview mirror, because commodity prices, a lot of them literally crashed down 50-60%. Corn.
I think he was talking about gas prices.
Well, gas prices, but crude oil was down 20%. But yes. Here's the point. Here's the point I was trying to make. Is it possible that inflation peaked in June? Maybe. And now Biden put it out there that it may be rearview mirrored. Will the August number come in at a 9.1? I doubt it. And again, this is following through on our conversation with Dr. Busler yesterday, and just looking at commodity prices, looking at some of the employment reports. I mean, we had first-time claims of unemployment be 244,000 today. Still a very low number, but that was the highest number this year. Okay? So there is a possibility, folks, it could have peaked, but it's way, way, way too early to say that.
Well, when I was 20, I used to say, am I peaked in terms of losing my hair? Here's the thing. To me, oil prices are down because the consumption is down. People don't want to spend the money. So it's not a matter of the prices going down. It's a matter of the demand has gone down, and that's why the prices are going down.
Well, two other reasons it's gone down too. Demand in China has been less because of
Right.
COVID lockdowns in China, and what you just said, traders who had speculative dollars in oil are taking them out in anticipation that there could be a recession down the road. You don't want to be caught long oil at $100 if the country goes into recession. You know, I'm in the camp that says, you know, the prices dip down, but they're still hovering $96, $97, $98 a barrel, below 100, effectively down between 20 and 25% from their peak. Gas prices at retail gas stations across the country have come down. It's still elevated. But here's why I'm not 100% certain on this peak inflation, Jeffrey. You know, wages continue going up, okay? And Michael, Dr. Bussler and I talked about it yesterday on the show, the risk of wage price inflation. You know, there was an article out the other day, Social Security increase could be 10%. Think about, what do we have in this country? Some 65 million, 70 million people on Social Security. You bump that up 10%, that is more spending in the economy at a time when the Fed's raising rates to try to prevent that. So for every one of these actions, folks, there's a counter reaction. And that's why I'm saying, you know, there is somewhat of a risk in it, Jeffrey.
Well, when I was in advertising and I used to do research on these numbers, this is the period where we're going to have the highest amount of seniors. So the number of people on Social Security are going to go way up.
Yep.
But on the other hand, in terms of oil prices, right tomorrow we have a president on his knees going, please give us more oil.
Yeah,
to Saudi Arabia. And they're going to say no.
Well, they're probably going to say no because they don't have the ability to produce anymore. But the sad thing about it, and again, not to regurgitate previous shows where we've talked about this endlessly, noted economists of both parties are saying if he would just moderate his energy policies here in the U.S., we could help ease some of this pain. I mean, it really is that simple, folks. He doesn't have to go radical anything. He just needs to moderate some of his policies. I mean, there's an opportunity right now, we've talked about it last week, to get 180,000 barrels out of Alaska. But what are they doing? There's still environmental issues holding it up, but it's very close. He could approve it. And that's an extra 180,000 barrels a day. But you know, Jeffrey, it's really interesting. Underlying that, both the issue with oil production, the issue with the consumer price index, we just talked about the producer price index. I know it can be confusing, folks, but we got to drill down so you're aware of these. There's, on the CPI yesterday, and you've heard us talk about this, if you strip out what they term volatile food and energy cost, the core CPI was at 5.9%. Now you say, Mark, that's a lot better than 9. It is, but even according to Larry Summers, a 5.9 core CPI is a bad number, and Summers characterized it, it's way out of control. Now, and Larry Summers, Jeffrey, if you remember, a year ago when we were talking on the show, when inflation was creeping up to the 3 to 4 range, he warned that this could happen, and he was right.
Well, did you hear what McConnell said yesterday?
Among which subject?
Well, the Democrats are talking about another package.
Oh, yes, they were.
They were, but McConnell basically said to them, do you really want to make the inflation higher for your states?
Well, I'm going to address that point. Look, the answer to that question is yes. The Democratic Party and the radical left that's in the Biden White House, I'm talking about the staffers, the economists, these radical leftists that are in the White House working, that craft the policies of the administration, yes, to them, climate change and social engineering is more important than what Americans pay for a gallon of gasoline.
Yeah.
You know, Joe Manchin came out yesterday and basically poured cold water on the idea of what him and Schumer have been, quote, talking about, a sized down Build Back Better package. That would have been, think about it, as bad as it is, folks, if these crazy Democrats had their way and they had passed this bill last year, you'd have more spending on top of what we have now. We'd be north of 10, 11, 12% inflation if that had happened. Now, Manchin sees through this. So they're talking about some plans to lower prescription drug prices. That's about as far as it's gotten. And that probably ain't going to go very far. But this climate stuff that they're talking about, this social stuff they're talking about, again, if the Democratic Party and the Biden administration didn't have Manchin standing in the way, they would be doing a smaller version of Build Back Better, which would be more inflationary. But you know, Jeffrey, when a reporter asked an economist in Biden administration who works in the White House yesterday about this, she said, no, this is important that we pass this because we need to wean ourselves off fossil fuels and focus more on renewable energy. We need these social spending programs for people's health to kick in. I mean, it was like she was oblivious to what the American people are feeling. And it's a clear example, and this has happened so fast, how the Republican Party basically is the party of the working person and the party of fiscally conservative people, and the Democratic Party is a liberal party of environmentalists, these people who are pro-climate, I mean, the climate worshiper class, the ultra-white liberal elites, and then African-American women. That's the core base of the Democratic Party. And you notice I didn't.
It's interesting. If you remember, before any of this happened, you and I were talking and say, gee, if they do this stuff, they're going to blow out the economy.
Yeah. So now we have a bad situation on our hands, and they're still trying to push us. Good news is, he made it crystal clear yesterday. He says, with inflation like this, you think we need to put more spending? He says, no, I'm not voting for anything like that. So that was really, really good news that he threw cold water on that. But you have to understand something. Philosophically, the Democratic Party believes, they worship that altar of climate change. And what they don't get, even if the United States totally weaned itself off and was 100% renewals, other countries around the world will coal, oil, natural gas, you name it. Because the rest of the country is not as stupid as we are with these environmental radicals. Look, we can do both. There is a blend of renewable and oil, gas, nuclear, coal. There is a blend that can work. My approach has always been, let's do all of the above. There's no reason we shouldn't. But
I'm going to say something radical, okay? Because I've done a lot of research on this, and I have a close friend, Mark Morano, who runs Climate Depot, and he's done movies on this.
Mm-hmm.
There has never been proven that the climate is changing because of man-made stuff. Everything they've said and predicted has been computer models, and I don't know about you, but I can't think of everything that the Earth does to be able to create a model. There's been actually what I say is looking out the window and seeing what's happening. If you look at the satellite data, and when things weren't working well for them, they said, let's look at the satellite data. Well, the satellite data hasn't shown there's been any increase in temperature in like 20 years. Okay, so that's part of it. The other part is, that 97% number? If you look at the study, and I have, it's all bogus information. The people whose studies they use, they said, no, that's not what it says. Okay, so we've been handed a load of crap.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate on that, whether it's real or not. Look, the fact is the planet's warming. The question is it caused by humans? It's inconclusive about that. We can do a whole show on that.
Look at the trends.
Yeah.
In Earth's history, there are warming periods that close.
Right.
When I was in high school, they were saying, watch out, we're going to have an ice age.
Global cooling. Yeah, I know.
Right?
It varied. Yep, I remember that. Yep. Let me ask you this. Let me shift internationally, Jeffrey, because this is a big deal. Biden is in the Middle East right now. All right. Donald Trump had a great relationship with Israel. He had a great relationship with the Saudis. The United States recognized Jerusalem as the capital. Under Trump, the Abraham Accords were signed. Right now, you can fly directly from Israel to Saudi Arabia. That was not the case before Trump's presidency. Now President Biden's over in Israel. And obviously the United States and Israel are close allies. But talk about the implications, Jeffrey, because you wrote an article for Lid Blog earlier today. I read the article, very well written. But for our viewing and listening audience, give our viewers the behind the scenes, what's really happening, what are some of the risk rewards, the relationship between Israel and the Saudi side of the situation versus Israel and Iran.
You have to start with the difference between Trump and every other president. Okay. Every other president, including Biden, has said the way to have a deal is you have to have a deal with the Palestinians first. And it's got to be land for peace. Trump said, no, let's get everyone else so the Palestinians will be alone and they're going to have to make peace.
Right.
And there's no such thing as land for peace. It's peace for peace. Okay. Biden has gone back to that old way. The Iranian JCPOA, the nuclear plant. One of the reasons why Trump was able to get that the Abraham Accords done is because, everyone talks about Israel not wanting the deal. All the Sunni states don't want the deal because they're all afraid of Iran, especially the Saudis.
And the Sunni states are?
Well, the Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, but the most important one is Saudi Arabia.
Correct.
And expect when the president goes there tomorrow, he's going to get an earful about that because they're not happy. The thing is, Iran wants to be the head of the Muslim world,
right? Instead
of Saudi Arabia, which is really but it's the difference between Shia and Sunni. The interesting thing is it's the same religion, but they have different interpretations. So they all think the other's wrong. But there are a couple of elements that Trump did that made this thing happen. Like I said, he didn't do you have to do make peace with the Palestinians first. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, he came out with the deal of the century. Okay, and the deal of the century had two possibilities. One, Palestinians could say, I love it, let's make a little changes in this peace. The other one is the Arab countries would get a little pissed off at Palestinians because they didn't even try to negotiate. And by not choosing to participate in it, its fellow Arab countries were really upset. It kind of opened the door for Trump to make a peace deal not using the Palestinians first. Mm-hmm. Okay. The other thing is that a lot of these countries are already working with Israel behind the scenes because of the JCPOA. When Trump lost the election, Saudi Arabia was this close to coming into it. Once he lost, the Saudis say, this is the guy who used to say we were a pariah state. We're not doing this.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's almost like Biden pushed them out.
Well, let's elaborate a little more on that Palestinian issue, because effectively what Trump did with those peace accords, he took the issue away from the Palestinians.
Well, he took some of the issues away.
Yes.
Like when he said that Jerusalem is Israel's capital, all of a sudden religion wasn't on the table anymore.
Right.
Because it was a done deal.
Right.
So these other countries, except for the Palestinians, said, you know what, it's over. So let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
There was another smart move he did. But the other thing is that he made the other Arab states believe that he had their back.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he did.
And, Biden comes from Obama, and they didn't think Obama had their back.
Right.
And certainly, and Biden isn't showing that.
Well,
but when Trump said Jerusalem is Israel's capital, they didn't have to negotiate it anymore. So that's one less thing they have to negotiate. Okay. Then what he did is he made America energy independent. Why is that important? Because a lot of these Arab countries make a lot of oil. When he made America energy independence, it took that threat away from them. Because they could say, I don't like this, and we're going to stick your oil to somebody else. So it was another calculated move that was towards this that made it smart. And the most important part is that instead of making it land for peace, he made it an economic deal. And the new countries like the UAE now have a big trade going on with Israel. They're making a lot of money.
Right.
And let me tell you something. Money is better than war. I don't care what country you are.
That's right.
And, you know, the trade is up like crazy with all those countries. Okay. What his thing is that if we create these deals with most of the other Arab countries, the Palestinians are going to feel isolated, and they're going to have to return, you know, they're going to have to switch their policies and actually negotiate.
And, you know, Jeffrey, this typifies the difference between Trump and Biden, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. You've got radicals in the Democratic Congress like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and I could name others. They're the poster children of this deal, who are blatantly anti-Israel. I mean, they are pro-Palestinian. Pramila Jayapal, name it another. I mean, I could go on. It's all squad members, leftist in Congress, and some
But
leftists.
it's more than that.
Yeah, please.
It's more that the man with the orange hair, anything he did that worked, we don't want to do it.
Right, exactly. That's
It happened on the border, it happens with oil, and it happens with this. Even though it was building peace, more and more countries are coming into it.
Yep.
They wanted to get rid of it. And the interesting thing is, if you look at it, even if you hated Trump, this was something that worked.
And Biden sort of came out and acknowledged today that the Abraham Accords worked, and he wanted to continue them. So
He screwed it up. He keeps saying, let's bring the Palestinians into it. They're not going to be into it until they're forced to be into it.
Right, right. And what's the old...
And I'm not saying there shouldn't be a Palestinian state. Although it's not, you don't start off by saying there's a two-state solution. That's at the end. You start off by saying we're going to isolate you.
Yeah, that two-state solution has been a failure for 50 years. So, I mean, look, the old saying in the Middle East, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, never so true as to the relationship Israel has now with the Saudis and some of the other of that faith. There's a
but they were all backdoor relationships. Now some of them have come to the front.
Well, having direct flights from Israel into Saudi Arabia, that's through the front door. That's not backdoor stuff anymore. Because literally, Joe Biden can now, when he leaves Israel to fly into Saudi Arabia, he can take off from an Israeli airport and fly directly to Saudi Arabia. Folks, that's fairly new. I mean, that didn't happen prior, to Donald Trump, really. It was not the case.
Early 2020.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, yeah, Jeffrey, I'm glad you added that perspective to it because, a lot of times we get the mainstream media report, and the mainstream media is typical. The Palestinians, they're oppressed, they're this, they're that, and they take their side. Whereas Israel has been a staunch ally of the U.S. for a long period of time. They stand as, a democracy in the Middle East. And again, people worry about the Iran situation. And I've said time and time again, the U.S. can stand up and say Iran will never get a nuclear deal. But the Israelis know when they get close. And when the Iranians...
I've got to tell you something. I found an article from 2008 that I wrote where Joe Biden said Israel's going to have to get used to a nuclear Iran.
Yeah,
so either it's his dementia or he's making up one of them.
Yeah, I think it's just a combination. He was just wrong as he's been on.
But when someone says to you, well, Israel is always the aggressor, I say to them, well, give me one concession the Palestinians
They've made none, and they for years they were a terrorist organization. So
they still are.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's still a lot of every opportunity they get to sow destruction, and They do.
They have something they call a military wing. Yeah. It's like calling the Marines our military wing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's run by the same government.
Yep. Yeah, no question. All right, let me shift a little bit here away from the Middle East, and let's talk about some of our favorites, or the Republican favorite, Donald Trump. There's been a lot of news about Trump lately. Will he announce for president? When is he going to announce? There were some people thought he would do it over 4th of July. There's a big debate both internally within Trump's circle, not if he's going to announce, that's pretty clear, but when he will announce his run. Republicans are saying, put it off as long as possible because he's such a polarizing figure. We don't want anybody talking about anything except the issues facing the country right now, which primarily is inflation. Your thoughts, Jeffrey?
I think he's going to wait until after the midterms.
I hope so.
If he doesn't, he's being selfish.
Right. Well, they talked about that.
You just said.
Yeah. Yeah, but think about his past. I mean, Trump does what's in Trump's best interest. You know, I agree with you 100%. Excuse me. We should wait until these midterms are over before he does. I know he's going to do it. There's plenty of time. To announce it prior to the midterms only gives Democrats a potential issue to run against. We don't need that. There's plenty of things right now that the Democrats are messing up. Look, you can't blame the Republicans. We control no branches of government, no presidency, no Senate, no House. Yeah, we can block some legislation. But when someone says, well, what's the Republican policies? My answer is real simple. Our policies is stop all the bad things the Democrats are doing as best we can. We control nothing right now. So it's not even fair to say, well, what would you be doing? Because we can't do anything. If Trump does announce it prior to the midterms, that is just going to create another issue. And we don't need that. I'm in your camp on that, 100%. If he wants to run...
I don't know if he runs, if he's going to get the nomination. That's controversial. But I got to tell you something. DeSantis is starting to look pretty good.
Ron looks good. Mike Pompeo looks good. Tom Cotton. Tim...
Did you see how much weight Pompeo lost?
Oh, yeah. It's 60 pounds. I mean, he's clearly in fighting shape. But yeah, there's a lot of candidates looking to sort of dip their toes in the water here. And we'll see. Again, I believe we're going to have a contested GOP primary with or without Trump. And I believe Trump will be part of the equation. And my opinion is this. If Trump goes out and runs, he's been told, you got to stop the grievance crap, quit looking backward and go forward. Okay, if Trump runs, he has a right to run. A lot of people say, well, he would only be a one-term president. Well, okay, but he has the right to run, and if he wants to, announce it after the midterms, and then if Ron DeSantis announces, or Cotton, or Pompeo, or Tim Scott, or Nikki Haley, or Christine Noem, or whomever, okay, that's what primaries are for. Your ideas, let's get out and see what happens. So I'm in your camp. If he decides, and I believe he will run, wait till after the midterms. There's nothing to push any earlier. Let's get into some polling. Yeah, go ahead. You had a comment.
Well, I was going to say that if he kept his mouth shut, and and I always say I voted for the guy with the mean tweets, but if during the election season, if he just stayed calm, he would have won.
Yes, yes, he would have. I mean, it was very close, and
his programs are wonderful. But people didn't care. They Biden said, I'm going to make everything nice again, which he didn't do, but they believed him.
The irony of ironies right now, and again, 64% of Democratic voters do not want Biden to run. The irony of ironies right now is the only person that Joe Biden, again, these are way early polls, but the only person that could beat Trump right now is Joe Biden. Any other Democrat that runs, Trump would likely win. Or any Republican would beat a Democrat. But again, that's a long way away. I don't want to admit it. Let's talk about current elections. 2 polls out. Really interesting read on them, Jeffrey. In the state of Florida, Marco Rubio, sitting 2-term senator, leads Representative Val Demings, Democrat. She represents the Orlando area. She was a former police chief in Orlando. He's up on her between 5 and 8 points. Rubio is expected to win. He's heavily favored. Val Demings is a good candidate. She is an African-American woman. She was a former police chief in Orlando. the issue with Val Demings is she's a Democrat, okay? Florida's trending Republican. It has that. Rubio has some advantages. But I believe the election will be close. I think if Rubio were to win this thing by 5 points, that's going to translate, 52.5, 47.5, 52-48, somewhere around there. By Florida standards, folks, that's a blowout election. But
the other thing is, we were just talking about Israel. She's anti-Israel.
Yeah, she's had those positions in the past.
Florida's where Jews go to die.
And I wish, it's always confused me how elderly Jewish people could ever consider voting for a Democrat, but they do for some inexplicable reason. I don't get it.
I always call Florida God's waiting room.
Yeah, everybody does. And in another poll, this one's up in Georgia, really interesting. In the senatorial race, Raphael Warnock shows a 50-47 lead over Herschel Walker. A month ago, that lead was 50-42. That race will tighten. But interesting thing, while people are looking at incumbent Raphael Warnock over Walker in the Senate, in the governor's race, Brian Kemp, Stacey Abrams, Kemp's currently leading Abrams by 5 points. Again, 52-48, 47, however you want to call it. So two incumbents have small leads. Look, we got a long way to go, but both of those races are going to be very tight, Jeffrey.
Well, I think that they want Abrams to lose a second time, so maybe she would concede the first one.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But that wouldn't surprise me, because Kemp is a much better candidate, will be a much better governor. I mean, most people think he was a good governor.
Yes, they do. Yes.
So I'm hoping he wins.
Yeah.
I don't like Warnock, okay, for a whole bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
But other guy he doesn't seem like a senator to me. He doesn't have good ideas. He's
basically in that position because Trump suggested that he run. He won his primary. Again, I'm going to support him.
He's a great running back, though.
He's a legend in Georgia. When as the economy, we'll see how things play out over the next couple months. Warnock has his base of supporters. Walker has his. When you're, let's see, we're in July, August, September. You're 3 months out until election. It's a lot of time, but both
116 days.
Yeah, both of these people are very well known. Again, Warnock's a sitting United States senator now. He won election back a year and a half ago, so he's there.
But he's also a hater.
Again,
you name it, he hates it.
I got it. I get it. But again, the people of Georgia, they did elect him. So, and the state's changing. So again, tight thing. Couple minutes left. We've talked about Joe Biden's approval ratings. They're in the tank. CNBC is the latest to reaffirm that. They came out with a poll today, showed Joe Biden, under their polling methodology now, and they use the same pollsters, NBC, their sister station. They've got him at 36%, an all-time low in their polling. To put it in perspective, folks, the lowest approval rating Donald Trump ever had was 37%. He's below Trump at this point. As a matter of fact, of the last 6 presidents since CNBC's been doing this poll, he's the lowest. And did you catch that clip where a reporter asked him the other day, Mr. President,
yes.
Are you going to run? Are you going to run? And he comes, hey, where do you get your folks? Jack, where do you get your figures? Jack calls everybody Jack. And the guy says, well, the majority of Democrats don't want you to run, according to the polling. He goes, no, 92% of them do want me to run. Okay, he could have been a little less confrontational, a little less hot-headed. The fact
and that
is,
number was just want him to run against Trump.
That's right. The fact is, right now, the majority of Democrats do not want him to run. Okay, he would be 82. And look, a lot of Democrats realize this. My belief is they'll push him out. After the midterms, when Republicans take the House, I'm still on the fence on the Senate, not sure which way it's going to go, he'll agree, I'm a one-term guy, to free up time for other people to run. Okay, so Jeffrey, we're at that point.
What's next?
Yes, what's next?
Well, some people are pushing Buttigieg, and that way he can ride his bicycle to the White House. There's so many people that are interested in it. and none of them are good.
Yeah, I think
They don't have a strong bench.
they do not have a. If Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg are the strength, they got some real problems. But anyhow, let's see what happens here. I believe when the midterms are over, the powers that be in the Democratic Party will go to the White House and say, Joe, it's over, somebody else. But anyhow, folks, a lot of things we talked about would happen, did happen. I'll give you this prediction. We got 30 seconds left, Jeffrey. I think, Biden will have, I think, a decent trip in Saudi Arabia. He's not going to bring up the Khashoggi thing. He'll come back, and then he'll try to push this Build Back Better through. It goes nowhere, and I think we head into the midterm elections with no more Democratic spending.
Oh, I agree with that. I think he's already made a couple of faux pas in Israel, and I think he's going to have a worse time in Saudi Arabia. I think he's going to come home with the proverbial tail between his legs. This morning, he said that the eastern part of Jerusalem is not part of Israel.
I didn't catch that, but if he did, that's just beyond stupid. I mean,
but he doesn't even to say anything.
I know. It's really bad.
What Trump always said is that's a negotiated thing.
Yeah.
And Salman is mad at him for saying it's a pariah state, for going after Iran.
Right.
And now, and just before we were begging for their oil or to produce more oil, we had the gas prices down to lower than $50 per gallon.
Per barrel.
For barrel. So we screwed them on that. And now we cut off the things and we're begging them for more.
Well,
they like consistency.
Yes, they do.
Actually, we do too, but we don't have it.
Time will tell on this. When the Fed meets, I'm hoping they only raise 75, but they could end up being 100. Jeffrey, thanks for the great commentary today, folks. We've had a wild week, lots of stories. We're going to continue to cut through the propaganda. Thank you for viewing and listening. Everybody have a great and a safe weekend, and we will be back and see you on Monday.
Take care, folks.